Donald Trump will be the GOP nominee. He will go up against Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders is a great candidate. He ain't going to win. Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, great candidates. They're not going to win. The reality of the matter is Donald Trump is the front runner. And he's got to keep everyone else at bay. And in some cases, really, really far away from him. Dangerous people like Marco, like Ted, and even like Jeb. They're very, very dangerous to his front runner status. Now, a lot of people want me to say shame on Donald Trump because he brought up Bill Clinton's 1980s and 1990s extramarital affairs. And was the video that he put out on Instagram crass, rude, inappropriate? Absolutely to all of those things. Will I be voting for Donald Trump? More than likely not. Why do I say more than likely not and just not definitively not? Well, because Donald Trump is polling 1 in 5 Democrats. Because Donald Trump, while being a populist, and let me say something else, being a populist isn't necessarily a good thing. You're just basically a schlub that says whatever people want to hear at the time they want to hear it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got, an advanced political acumen. It doesn't mean that you're an intellectual. It doesn't mean that you're an innovator. It doesn't mean you're a pioneer. It just happens that you're saying what people want to hear when they want to hear it, and really that doesn't require a lot of talent. However, Donald Trump is a very successful business person. Has his shows on TV that do very well, is a celebrated author, and happens to pack halls throughout the country. Just recently, I believe in Vermont, just a couple days ago, or maybe even just yesterday, he packed a hall that only sat 1,400 people with 20,000 people. That gives standing room only just a whole different meaning. He doesn't back down to hecklers. Hell, he didn't even back down to Megyn Kelly. So the reality of the matter is that Donald Trump is not just a populist. He's so much more than that. But he's also someone that isn't going to put up with any bullshit. And he's got the beautiful luxury of not being a career politician. Now, that same beautiful luxury is what's causing a lot of Republican pundits, including Bill O'Reilly, to say, this guy's not electable. This guy's not going to win states like California and New York and Florida. Sure, he is fun to watch, but he's not going to get the people to the polls. So Donald Trump needs to keep not only his Republican colleagues at bay or his Republican adversaries at bay, but he's going to be taking pot shots at Hillary Clinton because that's what the front runner does. The front runner is not going to wait for New Hampshire, is not going to wait for Iowa. He's just going to start attacking the front runner of the Democratic Party, or the person that's more than likely going to be that front runner. Because we all know that Bernie Sanders is very, very talented and very, very eloquent and has never flip-flopped on any issue and says what he says today, what he said 30 years ago. And that, in and of itself, is a beautiful, admirable, sort of persona. Unfortunately, that is not the persona that gets elected in Washington. Hillary is the person that gets elected in Washington. And Hillary really doesn't have any competition because everyone's scared to run against her. And so the reality of the matter is that Donald is just setting his sights on her. Now, he brings up Bill Clinton's 1980s and 1990s extramarital affairs. Is that relevant to her running for president? Absolutely not. Does that speak against her role on women's rights? Absolutely not. Women's rights is suffrage, equal pay, the right to choose. It doesn't have to do with whether or not a woman stays in a bad marriage or not. That has nothing to do with feminism. It has nothing to do with women's rights. It has nothing to do with anything you would have read in the Feminine Mystique. It has nothing to do with any of that. However, it gets people rattled up. It gets people talking about Trump. It keeps them on front page news. Ben Carson looks like he's about to fall asleep. Jeb Bush is basically a lot like Fred Thompson, may rest in peace, some years ago. Fred Thompson, people wanted Fred Thompson. Fred Thompson would have made an amazing GOP nominee, but Fred Thompson, quite frankly, just didn't want it. And a lot of people look at Jeb Bush and they say, this guy doesn't want it. This guy's got the personality of Al Gore, which is basically the personality of a rice cake. I mean, Al Gore now's got a great personality, but in 2000, it was like you looked at him and you want to fall asleep. You know what I mean? Carly Fiorina, phenomenal candidate, but she doesn't have a prayer of winning. Chris Christie, what do you have, 2%? I just found out Mike Huckabee's running. Who knew he was running? You know what I mean? Marco Rubio, very, very talented candidate. Unfortunately, he wears shiny boots and doesn't know jack shit about domestic policy. He's a wizard at foreign policy. It's like another Ron Paul. Ron Paul knew everything about foreign policy, but domestically, people were like, well, you don't really have anything to say. You know what I mean? And then Ted Cruz is interesting, but again, Ted Cruz is too far right. Donald Trump isn't far right or far left. He's just him. He's an independent. And really, whether you watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, whatever, line you go, both lines are pretty privy to the fact that the voters that really make the difference are the independents. Whether they're in the GOP or the DNC, it's the independents that ultimately make the decision. And more Americans are identifying as independent because people don't want to be party whores. They don't want to vote straight down Democrats, straight down Republican, because they want to vote on the candidate. They want to vote on the issues. And a lot of times these party whores, honestly, these parties stick people in local and regional elections just because nobody else wants to run, or because they owe political favors, or because this person's going to bring more money into their state and national elections. And what happens is they do a disservice to the regions, they do a disservice to the counties and the cities and the municipalities that they're going to represent. And people are just fed up with it. And they look at Donald Trump and they say, look, this guy doesn't owe anything to the GOP. This guy was a Democrat 10 years ago. This guy didn't leave the Democratic Party, like Reagan says. The Democratic Party left him. This is a guy that writes his own ticket. This is a guy that stands on his own 2 feet. This is a guy that doesn't need the GOP's money. This is a guy that's packing forums like in Vermont, like I said, a 1,400 hall seat with 20,000 people. This is not a guy that is going to back down from Megyn Kelly calling him a sexist pig or whatever she called him or whatever she implied. This is a guy that's going to stand up for what he believes, and this is a guy that's very attractive to the electorate. So, him bringing up this video of Hillary Clinton and saying that, Bill Clinton was basically, would screw anything with a pulse, basically, and then have Bill Cosby make some sort of a cameo appearance there. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, and it's totally unacceptable, and he should be condemned for it as a politician. But guess what? He's not a politician. He's not a politician. So the reality of the matter is that I'm not going to condemn it. I mean, there's been so many things over the years, things that have been brought up, from people's alleged alcohol abuse to extramarital affairs to just all sorts of things. You know what I mean? Barack Obama's religious beliefs were brought into question, and I'm not even talking about the Islamic alleged views. I'm talking about when he was going to Jeremiah Wright's parish. So really, although I don't necessarily think that it's the most important thing to be talking about, I think right now IS or ISIS, whatever the hell you want to call those lunatics, that's very important. They just discovered that they have a terrorist training camp in Raqqa, Syria. They know exactly where it's at. I don't know why they don't just drop a barrel bomb on it, but the reality of the matter is they know where it's at. And here we are talking about Ted Cruz's boots and who, Bill Clinton got with. The reality of the matter is that these issues are not important. We have ISIS. We have the economy. We have immigration. We have North Korea that just, it doesn't look like they tested an H-bomb, but it does look like they tested an atomic bomb. I mean, these people are psychotic. And the fact that they could have atomic weapons is just insane. So we have all these problems in the world and nationally. Should we really care about Monica Lewinsky or Paula Jones or any of that stuff? Probably not. But Donald Trump has got his finger on the mainstream pulse. And he wants to stay being the front runner, and he wants to stay being the most talked about, and he wants to stay getting people engaged. And even though Marco Rubio makes so much sense on foreign policy, even though Ted Cruz has got a great fiscal alternative to the Democrats, I don't support it, but I have to admit that it's viable. They're politicians, they're senators, and people are just sick of senators. They're sick of representatives. They're sick of Supreme Court justices sitting on the bench for their whole life. They're sick of presidents, playing God and dropping executive decisions and executive orders like this new gun control, background check that President Obama just dropped down, which is constitutionally totally within his powers. But people are just like, we don't want a president, be he a Democrat or Republican, or be he a man or a woman, whatever. We don't want a single chief executive telling the entire nation how to act. I mean, it's basically the administrative branch making and enacting and enforcing law all in one. It's not a law, right? It's a executive order, but basically it sure looks like a law, feels like a law. It's going to affect the American people. And, it's almost like, back in the olden days in Great Britain when it was, absolute rule by kings, the divine right of kings. And the king would say, well, this is it and that's it, kind of like the Pope does with the Catholic Church. Infallibility, you know what I mean? People are just sick of that shit. So reality of the matter is right now we are in a climate where people see someone like Donald Trump, and as it's been stated, 1 in 5 Democrats are polling for Trump. They see someone like Donald Trump, they say, look, this guy's got a really bad hairdo. He sticks out his lower lip. He has no respect for anything or anyone. Says a lot of stupid shit. But you know what? He makes saying stupid shit cool. You know, the opposite of that, unfortunately, is Vice President Biden, who makes saying stupid shit sound really stupid. Yeah, I mean, the reality of the matter is that right now Donald Trump can do no wrong. Uh, basically everything's been thrown at this guy. You know, the race card's been thrown at him. The sexist card's been thrown at him. Everything's been thrown at him. I mean, you know what I mean? So, soon they're going to attack him for being divorced and this and that. And I hope they do that. Actually, I hope that, and really, speaking as a Democrat, I hope they don't do that. Because guess what? Over, 1 in 2 marriages in the country wind up in divorce. Most marriages don't even last 6 months. I mean, there's a huge number of marriages that don't even last 6 months. Can you believe that? So if they were to attack him for that, it would just really just feed into him. I mean, I would love for the mainstream press to attack him or the DNC or whoever to attack him for that, because he's just going to turn it around into a win. And so I'm sort of siding for the guy a little bit. I'm kind of rooting for the guy a little bit. You know what I mean? He sees hecklers there. He'll listen to him 1 or 2 times. He'll boot him out of the hall. You know what I mean? In Vermont, he wouldn't even let their coats get back. It's like, send them out there in 10-degree weather. I don't give a shit. Reality of the matter is that his approach is just attractive. It is. I don't agree with anything. Well, I don't agree with most of what he says, but he's a likable guy. You know what I mean? If you want to throw a big, middle finger at the establishment, voting for this guy is going to do it. And you think Hillary Clinton is going to do anything revolutionary? Electing Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, any of these guys, this is why there's so many comparisons. I don't know if anyone's even watching this video anymore, but that's why there's so many comparisons between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Because you elect either one of those guys, and I hate to say it, poor Bernie has no chance. I mean, Hillary Clinton is just basically, she's going to have all the super delegates. She got screwed by a few super delegates in 2008 that, supposedly were loyal to her and went over to Obama. And they even say that if she would have forced the convention, technically she would have still had more super delegates than Obama. And that was a super razor margin thin close election. If anyone thinks that Bernie Sanders is going to get the amount of super delegates that Hillary Clinton's going to get, you're just nuts. I mean, God bless you for believing in this democracy of ours, this democratic system of ours, but you're insane. It's just not going to happen. That's just not how politics in this democracy, in this republic of ours works. So the reality of the matter is, even Donald Trump, who's got like just a massive majority of people, there's people suggesting that he might get screwed by his own convention, the GOP, and they're waving this document that he signed that he won't run third party. But the reality of the matter is, no one's going to stop Hillary. And, the only person that can beat her is Donald Trump. And the only 2 people in the race that will actually bring something new, a different working model, are Sanders, which can't win, and Donald Trump, who could win. Of course, there's going to be a lot of obstacles, and his own party is actually working against him. I mean, that's another thing, too. I mean, okay, so the commercial, the extramarital commercial, whatever, not cool, but imagine that this guy isn't just running against the left-wing media. He's running against his own party. Not directly, but indirectly, subconsciously, whatever you want to call it. His own party is trying to basically marginalize him. Fox News now is forced to have to actually recognize this guy, whether it's the Five or it's the Fox and Friends, or whether it's Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity. They have got, I don't know if Rupert Murdoch got on their ear and called him on the phone and said, look, this guy's going to get it. You need to get on the agenda. I don't know exactly what happened, but we've seen a progression even on Fox News of those anchors that were, some were skeptical and some were just downright condemning Trump, and now all of a sudden they're softening up. Everybody that's been in the lead at different times during this election, Ben Carson was in the lead for 10 seconds. I mean, Donald Trump has had it the whole way through. So, what do I think about the video? I mean, it's an Instagram video. It's a 15-second video. Instagram is the wave of the future. The Trump campaign knows it. The Clinton campaign, all campaigns know it. And you can't really, you can't beat around the bush with a 15-second ad. You have to just go straight for the knockout. And look, Bill Clinton was a great president in terms of his fiscal policy, in terms of his international policy. In 1996, a lot of Republicans that I knew in South Florida voted for him, which says a lot. But, this is going to be a real tough election. Now, imagine this other thing. Just imagine this other thing if you're still listening, and I'll shut up here in a second. Imagine if Donald Trump were to get this nomination begrudgingly by the GOP, and he were up against Hillary Clinton. Now, this is something that a lot of people have not talked about. If Donald Trump got this nomination from the GOP begrudgingly, okay, and they say that 27% of Republicans, recent polls, 27% of Republicans do not like Donald Trump. And I would gather that 27% are the bureaucrats in the Republican Party. That would be my guess. But let's just say that he got the nomination with this 27, 30% Republican base that just cannot stand the guy. And he goes up against Hillary Rodham Clinton, who not only would get the nomination by beating Bernie Sanders, but would be the institutional favorite, the favorite of the DNC. You know, the DNC doesn't want Bernie Sanders in there. If Hillary Clinton gets indicted because of the Benghazi situation and her emails, and let's say she couldn't run, and let's say it was Bernie Sanders and a couple stand-ins, and they had to give it to Bernie Sanders, the same blowback and the same sort of resistance that Trump is experiencing from the GOP, Sanders would be experiencing from the DNC, even though he would be really the only candidate left to win, because they do not want an open socialist getting that DNC nominate. They don't want him there. Even if he was a communist, if they could control him, they'd be cool with it. But they can't control this guy. This guy has not changed his position on marijuana, on gay rights, on women's rights, on social equality in 30 years. In 30 years. I think Chris Christie just flip-flopped on gun control in the last 3 days. You know what I mean? So the reality of the matter is we've got candidates right now that are flip-flopping on issues just to, get better poll numbers. This guy, Bernie Sanders, hasn't changed his opinion in 30 years. Maybe more than that. He is like the Ron Paul of the left. Excuse me, this way. The Ron Paul of the left. So, the parties don't want people they can't control. And if you honestly don't think that Barack Obama is at the beck and call of the DNC, that George W. Bush and his father and Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, and Ronald Reagan, all these people, all these presidents before us, going all the way back to who knows who, were not at the beck and call of the political machines that got them to office, then you're nuts. Donald Trump is not at any party's beck and call, nor is Bernie Sanders. So, yeah, I really don't give a shit about the video that Donald Trump. I'm rooting for the guy. I won't vote for him, I don't think, because I don't agree with a lot of his policy. But I find myself torn because I respect the fact that he is not a party whore. I don't like Hillary. I don't like her. I don't like her stances. I think she's a hypocrite. I think she's a flip-flopper. I don't think she's trustworthy. I don't give a shit about the Benghazi situation. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's a fucked up situation. It could have happened to a Republican just as easily as it happened to her. Reality of the matter is, at those high echelons of government, there's a lot of negligence. There's a lot of dereliction of duty. And I'm not going to sit here for 2 seconds and tell you it was Hillary Clinton's fault and she did such a horrible job that anyone could have done better. Because that's not the truth. There's so much bureaucracy and red tape and so much just, complete ineptness in Washington that, to put all the blame on her, or if a staffer sent her an email to her private account, or even if she told her family it was a terrorist act and told the nation that it was just because of a video or whatever, none of that, in my book, should disqualify her from the election. You know what I mean? Because it's just more of the same old, same old. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's a huge number of Republicans that did the same as her, and it's gone unnoticed because they're not running for president. You know what I mean? But the reality of the matter is I don't trust her. I don't think she would make a good commander-in-chief. I don't think that she has the American people's best interests at heart. I actually heard on Fox News someone mention her as caviar socialism. Basically, socialism for the people and caviar for her and her family. The reality of the matter, that's basically what they do in China. The Politburo, they live in the bastion of capitalism. The people are eating rice and living in a hut. You know what I mean? Because the people are part of the whole communist project, but the government lives the capitalist dream. So, look, guys, the reality of the matter is I don't trust her. I don't like her. I don't think she represents the best interests of the American people. I think Bernie Sanders does. So she's going to be Bernie Sanders because she's an institutional favorite. And then she's going to be up against Donald Trump, who I actually like as a person. I don't like him as a politician. I don't like his views, but I like him as a person. And that would create, I think, a very interesting conundrum for me in the ballot box. Do I vote for someone who I don't agree with, but at least I know where he stands? And maybe can be reasoned with, maybe might even be a good bipartisan president because you know where he stands, and maybe that's a good thing because then you know how to address him and you know what to bring to him, what not to bring to him, and maybe there could be some compromise. Or do I want to elect essentially a party bureaucrat that, you know, got into the Senate because Rudy Giuliani got sick and beat a second-rate candidate, that got Secretary of State because she couldn't win the presidency, that basically didn't get indicted because of her last name, that basically beat a qualified candidate, Bernie Sanders, because she owns the superdelegates and she owns the party or the party owns her or vice versa. You know, I don't know.